Ask the Podcast Coach for May 14th, 2022.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that music that means, hey, it's Saturday. It's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I'm Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com. And joining me right over there is the one and only Jim Cullison from TheAverageGuy.tv. Jim, how's it going, buddy?
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning to you. I don't know what it is about that music, but both of us in pre-show are struggling a little bit with energy. But as soon as the music starts, I'm all fired up. That's like what do they walk-on music? Is that what they call it?
That's it.
Is that what they call it? Yeah. So it's always good to be together on a Saturday morning.
Yeah, it is one of those things where we're both kind of. I had a friend in from out of town this week, and so twice this week, I was staying up later than I usually did, and the beautiful thing is it's going to be beautiful out today here in Ohio. So
yeah,
I hope I can get some time to get outside. But Jim, are you thirsty?
I am. Let's get cranking.
He's always thirsty. That's it. And of course, that coffee pour is brought to you by our friend Mark over at podcastbranding.co. Here's the cool thing about Mark. There are many. Number one, he's a podcaster. You have no idea how huge that is until you work with someone who's not a podcaster. And they're like, a what? So he's a podcaster. He's an award-winning graphic artist, and it's really a personalized approach. He listens to your podcast. He's going to meet with you one-on-one to talk to you about what kind of brand do you want. He's going to listen to your podcast. He's going to listen to your music and just make sure everything fits so that from the minute people see you, because remember, they see you before they hear you, everything is going to match up and just create this awesome brand. And of course, if you need more than artwork, he can do an entire website for you. If you need some sort of lead magnet or anything that you want to look good, there's really only one place to go, and that is Mark. Now, here's the other bonus, of course. I have to mention it. He's Canadian, and that means he's going to be polite. Podcastbranding.co. Tell him Dave and Jim sent you.
I always like to see you race up to the last minute.
Well, I can't. I've said this before. I need new glasses, and I was like, I can't read the numbers on the Rodecaster Pro. But we do have. It's fun. We had two people on podcast, or what this is, Twitter Spaces.
Yeah.
We had 4. We're down to 1. So they walked in and heard a bunch of ads and said, "Yeah, enough of this." But anyway, we have more.
Yeah, let's get these out of the way. Big thanks to Dan Lefebvre over there, Based on a True Story podcast at basedonatruestorypodcast.com. They have a new episode out for based on the 1956 film The Conqueror, and I think it's going to be interesting because they made movies differently in 1956. So you might, if you're interested in that, check it out. Based on a True Story Podcast.com. 203 episodes if you're looking for a new podcast. And then, Dave, we're powered by coffee here. And I mentioned last week that I was trying a new coffee, and I think Chris Colnane, who's always sending me coffee, sent me some more Island coffee, and he knows my favorite is the Green Room. So Chris, thanks for doing that. I think he was just a little worried, like, oh, you can't, like, this is just the best coffee in the world, and it always fires me up on Saturday mornings. Not a sponsor here, but they could be if they wanted to be. And Chris, thanks I got 2. It's always nice, Dave. I got 2 packages of coffee in the mail. How great. So Chris, thank you. I appreciate that.
There we go. And of course, this music, that's loud. Yeah, that is because we have not a new patron, but our buddy Ross Brand over at this is funny. I can't remember his, I'm drawing a total blank. Livestream Universe? Livestream. He's the king of Livestream. That's what yes, Livestream. That is so funny that I cannot remember. Here we go. Livestream Universe. I had it.
It's right on the top of the Dave. It's right.
Oh, there it is. Yes, it's right there on the top of the screen. Wow. Did we mention that Dave's tired? Yes, livestreamuniverse.com. That's so funny. This is the joys of live, because if this wasn't live, I'd redo that. But Ross has been very generous to help us out. He has taken his patronage from his previous level up to $20 a month. So if you really, and I don't say this because he's now an awesome supporter. I've said it before. This is a guy, and this is one thing maybe we should talk about, is I was talking with somebody the other day about Podpage, and they said, why doesn't Podpage have the ability to not only collect emails, but to be an email service as well, like Aweber or, all the other, MailChimp and all this? I said, because Brendan has decided to do one thing, and that's be the easiest way to make a great looking podcast website. And I said, there is a whole lot of shenanigans when it comes to being an email provider, because you've got spam, you've got deliverability, you've got all this other stuff that you have to deal with. And I said, I think it's best sometimes when you let the MailChimps and the Awebers and I always forget the ConvertKits, let them be the best at email. You do your thing, and we're going to do our thing. And Ross is a guy that does live streaming. Like, obviously he does podcasting and things like that. But if somebody asked me, hey, I have a question about like the best green screens and all that other kind of live streaming stuff, I'd be like, go talk to Ross, because I know some. Obviously we're live streaming now, but I did see somebody ask, and I'm not sure why it didn't fix itself. Last week, the episode about the 41-minute mark just took a giant dump, like just, and I was like, oh, so I think it was, boy, there's the brain again. Jason Bryant let me know, and he was like in Mexico or someplace, I forget where he's off traveling, and said, hey, just so you know, Ask the Podcast Coach just goes at like the 41-minute mark. So I listened to, I don't know what the deal was, but it was correct. So I uploaded a file, and it, should have replaced itself. And I apparently did not. So I also did, for our patrons, I just did a whole new episode. And so my apologies for that. I will look into this when we're done here, but it should have fixed itself a long time ago. So
did you unmute Twitter too?
I did. That would probably be why people were leaving.
Yeah, well, they didn't have to listen to the ads. We were just sparing them the ad segments in the beginning. So,
all right.
And you are tired. Like the date's wrong. I always know who the exact folks are in the audience. Like, it's killing a few of them that it says 15 and not 14. So you're just like, can you just Jade? It'll be okay. It's actually okay. I mean, I don't know. Does Google let you change? Will it let you change the title midstream? Can you actually edit this? I don't think once you're live. I think once
I'm live, I think you're done.
I don't think you can edit the title on this.
And
yes, it is the 14th. It'll be soon. It'll be the 15th. It'll be here tomorrow. It'll be okay.
just hang around.
It'll be fine.
And then I'm hearing someone's in a very subtle way has said, "Hey, Dave," in giant caps. Your audio is bad. So let me check here something real quick. I did reboot, and I am up a little more than usual. I'm usually around 85.
You're sounding okay. You sound okay to me. Yeah, you sound. I'd have said something if you were.
Yeah. Okay. I wondered. So, but James is nuts, by the way, because James has an adorable little boy. And yet, every time I see James, he's off to the gym doing push-ups and chin-ups and
nice.
all sorts of stuff. But on the other hand, if you have a little kid, you kind of want to be around for the little kid. Right. You got to take care of yourself. Right. Getting ready to launch a new show. He's super excited. What's the one thing most people forget to do before launch and realize it's a big deal? List your show. See, that's not a. It's a. I was going to say make sure to list your show in all the directories. That is actually the question of the month, by the way, at the School of Podcasting. If you're not in all the directories, no judgment. I just want to know why. Schoolofpodcasting.com/question. What's the thing that people forget? I think I see this a lot. People forget to put links to Apple, Google, Spotify, and Amazon. To me, that's the top 4 on their website. And then I'm doing this, I'm ruining, by the way, the podcast trailer show. And I'm amazed at how many people say, find me. Go find my show. in whatever podcast app you're listening to, which is fine. Kudos for being in all the apps. And I'm just like, man, depending on what the name of your show is, finding you could be an issue.
Yeah. I think people worry too much about the launch.
Yeah.
Like just get moving, because you're going to discover as you go for the next 6 months or a year or whatever, however long you're going to go, you'll figure out things change and those new things to do. And there's like, it's just not, I mean, yeah, it's an important day and it's awesome, but it's just, there's so much more to it day in and day out. I think what a lot of podcasters do is they focus so much on the technical aspects of getting it right that they forget there's an audience. And so when the audience contacts them or sends them an email or tries to communicate with them or sends them something on Twitter, they're not there to answer that. And in the early days of podcasting, not like early days like 2005, but I mean in your podcast when you're just started, you have some time to communicate with your listeners one-on-one. And you should be doing everything you can, either via email or whatever. It's just a unique time. And so I think the number one mistake folks make is they don't engage with their audience more than they should.
Yeah, I think I had someone in a Facebook group that said, hey, I'm not getting that many subscribers, but everyone I talk to loves my podcast. And I went, I've heard that phrase before. And then you listen to it and you go, do you realize that like your microphone's in another state when you're talking into it? Like that doesn't sound good. But everybody's like, oh, it's great. Oh, honey, look at you. You're all professional. I'm like, you notice nobody's talking about your content. They're talking about you and how you sound and how you look. I was like, I think that's it. People don't listen to it and ask questions like, did you listen to the whole podcast? What was the biggest takeaway from that episode? And would you recommend this to a friend that enjoys this topic? Those are hard questions to ask. They're even harder if you get somebody who's not, this is why you need somebody who's not related to you, because your family would be like, oh, it's great. I love the thing about the thing. And then, yeah. So I think that's probably an important thing that people miss is they don't get any kind of constructive feedback, because everybody thinks constructive feedback is, hey, can you take this and rip it to shreds? And they might find one thing that they were confused on and 17 things they thought were really great. And everybody's like, and I get that. So James says, I'm still working on linking to all the directories. Apple Podcasts is still pending.
That's surprising. They've been really, really fast.
Yeah, when you go
minutes.
into podcasts with an S, podcastconnect.apple.com, even before it's like in the directory, once you submit it, in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a link to your show. Because I remember it's like, whoa, that's new. So it's a little more slightly confusing because of the whole, is this a paid subscription podcast? You have to answer a few more questions and things like that.
I still would. I know we've talked about this a lot. We haven't talked about it in a while, though. I still would rather get 5 to 10 podcasts out with focusing on the quality of the content and working those things, and then somewhere between 5 and 10 do the big launch, whatever you're going to do, however you're going to advertise it, whatever, however you're going to work it, because you get better. The more of these that you do, you get better. And I think 5 is better than 1 and 10 is better than 5, from a quality standpoint, from you finding your voice and you doing your thing. And I think I'd invite them. I'd do a big launch at 10 and not 1. I just think it gives you some time to get in and takes the pressure off, get some episodes out there, share them. I mean, do some stuff. And then when you got 10 or whatever in the backlog, folks can go back and find it, then go do a big, and today you got to do a media launch. Like chances are your circle of influence is just not big enough to do a Facebook, LinkedIn, however you're going to do it, right? You're going to need to get outside. You're going to need to pay or something along those lines to get outside of your sphere of influence. I wouldn't do any of that though until I had 10 episodes done and published. Just that makes more sense to me, Dave.
Well, the thing that I was surprised with, because I this new show that I'm doing, the podcast trailer show, I'm using a dynamic tool. And it's one of those things where you go, okay, I'll do a trailer, then I'll play an ad, then I'll do a trailer, then I'll play an ad, and then I'll close it up. Okay. But you listen to your trailers and you're like, okay, cool. And I'm keeping everything super short. But when I actually listened to the show, I was like, whoa, that's way too many ads. It was like 30% of my content was ads. And I was like, that looked okay on paper, but man. So then I made the ad, then I put the ads into one slot instead of ad trailer. I went trailer, ad trailer. And I was like, okay, that's better, but I got to make the ads shorter. And eventually I was like, there are a couple things and this is really in theory, the stuff I should have done and not published. We always talk about record 10 and delete them. I'm just doing them in public, which is fine because I think I'm getting a whole, I think I had 23 downloads for the first episode. So it's gonna, what I like about it is I'm getting in front of people that are new. It's a new bubble that I'm getting into. Cause I usually alert the people that I'm promoting their promo that, hey, you've been spotlighted over here. Fred says, hey, can you refresh us on the question of the month for May? It is, are you listed in all the directories? And I kind of throw out Amazon because I'm somewhat confused. And again, I'm not trying to be judgy here. Why people don't list their show in Amazon? Is it I don't know? Or is there some sort of strategy? I've seen people that like, nope, I'm in Apple. If you want me, I'm in Apple. And that's the only place I'm listing. And I'm like, okay. And that's, again, if that's the case, then what's your strategy? And again, I'm not here to bash it. I just want to know why, because it's that whole understand before being understood. And you can find it always at schoolofpodcasting.com/question. And then I just point it to whatever tool I'm using to collect that and go that whole 9 yards. But it really is. I think I had, well, here are some questions that I'm confused with that, I think sometimes we overthink stuff and I'm not quite sure. It's a little weird. One was when you're too lazy or can't find the motivation to create a new episode, what do you do? And I was like, quit? I don't know. Don't do an episode. Or, I mean, I've been in that situation and I spent an evening one time looking for resources to bring me more content. So it wasn't so hard to get to, to do the show. But the one that really, I was like, really? We're still asking, and again, this sounds kind of judgy, but I'm just like, in the world of Google, we're asking things like, how do you find really anything? But the question is, how do you find guests for your podcast? And I was like, because every time I turn around, there's Guestio, there's, podcast guests, there's, I just like, wow, okay. And then how do you get more reviews for your podcast? And I was like, ask? I mean, how? I don't know. So it's the Facebook groups this morning were.
Well, that question maybe though. Let's put a little spin on that question. Yes, ask. That's one thing. But getting a conversion on an ask is a whole nother, it's a whole nother expectation. Typically, you ask your audience to do something, you're going to get about a 3% response, right? We know that from just all the stats and everything we get back. Varies by audience, blah, blah, blah. But so getting a higher conversion, I think, from your audience on that than 3% is really, it's really hard. It's a lot of work. And I think you have to keep, this is one of those, everybody varies on this, but I think you have to keep asking. You have to keep reminding your audience. You have to kind of place it in a spot where, maybe it's not up front, it's at the end, right? Your most engaged audience is at the very end. If anybody's going to do anything, it's the person who made it all the way to the end. So I think oftentimes those kind of statements. And then, of course, social proof or social rewards by recognizing the ones that do leave reviews. People often feel like, okay, hey, I can get my name up there if I just leave this review, right? If I make a big deal about it. So I think you've got to kind of put a reward system in place if you want reviews. and some people do, Dave. I know we're not always big fans of the review, right?
Well,
But
my whole
there's some
thing
people
is,
it's important.
yeah. And my whole thing is as long as you know it doesn't help you get found, it's social proof. And B, for me, in my opinion, I don't think the best use of them is reading them at the very beginning of the show. Like, hey, welcome to Ask the Podcast Coach. Jim Mom 37 said, hey, love the show. Great guests. Okay. Like, hey, we're going to start off the show talking about how great I am. It's like, so.
Yeah. No, I'd agree. Get that content up first.
Yeah.
Even though we don't do that.
Well, you said a great point. Put it at the end where your mega listener is, right? The person that's really into the show. And, it's a great way to have people do that. So,
the inside baseball, and for folks who don't know what that because that's a phrase that may not resonate with everyone.
Right.
In other words, the stuff that only matters to the core audience, right? The jokes, the inside jokes, the community stuff, as I like to call it, should probably make its way towards the end. Now, in some cases, that's appropriate if that's what the audience is coming to hear. Like, if they're coming to hear that audience participation stuff, then that's your content. So put it up front if that's what they're expecting to hear, based on what they're coming for.
Yeah, I'm batting 1,000. Apparently, the question of the month has the wrong date there as well. So
you
at least I'm consistent.
Yeah, date time challenge.
I do. What I need is I seriously really need a new pair of glasses. Is what I need.
It's time.
I got to find something to blame it on. That's too funny. Stefan says he launched a podcast and got a radio station to promote it in their newsletter. Newsletters, here's the one thing that I've been doing this month, and it just dawned on me that aside from learning new stuff at Libsyn, right, I get to learn Glow and I get to do this and that. I have not taken an actual I want to learn something class in a while. Yeah. So you want to talk about live streaming insanity. So I took a $37 course. In fact, I'm missing one of the sessions today from Amy Porterfield. Now, if you're not familiar with Amy, she is Online Marketing Made Easy, I believe is her brand. She had 22. Well, how many people do you have in your chat, Jim, when you do your things for Gallup?
30, 40, something like that usually.
Really?
About the same number as we have here.
Amy had 2,200.
Oh, nice.
And it was a chat room like I had never seen. Yes. Like she said, hey, if you can hear me right now, please put yes. And it was just like, I was like, holy cow. But I've been, it's sometimes for me, I was just like, I just want to learn something. And so I've got another class this week from Tamsin Webster, which is a kind of how to say things to motivate people to do stuff class. I'm paraphrasing there. But that was just one where it's like, I need to take some classes, and I'm pondering. A couple years ago, I had a business coach, and it kind of helped just again to get that outside point of view, because you're thinking everything you're doing is great. Everybody says it's awesome. To have somebody come in and go, yeah, Dave, you need to raise your prices or whatever it is I need to do. This great question, Jim. Actually, it's from some guy named Jim. If you could take a class and learn one new thing, what would it be? Jim, what would you learn?
It's like, well, you mentioned this in the pre-show, and I was all of a sudden like, what would I right now if I were to take like what would be something? Because you kind of want it to be brain stimulating and something new and something interesting. That's a really good, Dave. That's a really good question. I'm interested to hear what folks say kind of out in the chat.
Randy is going to set up a class for me on how to get the date correctly. I did try to edit that. There is an edit at the top. It won't let me edit it while we're live.
No, I think once you're live, you can't. But it'll be right tomorrow. So it'll be fine. It'll be fine. People.
For me, I've always learned, and the guy that's probably going to be my coach said the same thing that I already knew. Here's my weakness. You ready for my weakness?
Yeah.
I love to help people. And he goes, I can just tell by the way you talk. He goes, you're doing live consulting for free. He goes, you are a giver. And he goes, and givers are notorious for not charging enough for their stuff. And I was like, you are about the 12th person to tell me that. So, but I also know marketing, even though I've been in sales training, I've taught salesmen before, but it was, very cookie cutter sales kind of stuff, how to overcome objections and things like that. So I've always known that marketing has not been my strong suit. And really, what I need a class on is focus. I tried to take one once. I just couldn't pay attention.
Or procrastination, right? I just could never get signed up for it.
To it. Exactly.
I think I'd like to take, and I've never done this, but I'd like to take a formal communications class, like corporate communications. Something where they just talk about the art of both speaking and writing, and in some of those, in that context. I think I could benefit. I do a lot of talking, but I've never really taken a formal communications class. So that might be something that's interesting.
JD says a deep dive into all features on Hindenburg Journalist. There are some features in there for the radio that I kind of go, oh, I'm not on the radio. So but I've never really kind of dove into them. Hindenburg Journalist is a cool program, though. The more I play with it, the thing I like about them is I said, hey, there's a way I can export if you make chapters, and it's the only tool I know of on a Windows machine that allows you to make chapters. And when I say chapters, I mean chapters in the MP3 file, not chapters podcasting 2.0 style. But that was my thing. I contacted their tech support. I said, it's cool that I can export this text file. Can we export it in a format that will work with podcasting 2.0? And they went, that's a really good idea. Can you give me an example of something? And I went like, here, this, and that. And they're like, we're on it. And I think that's one of the keys of any great product is listening to your audience, listening to their suggestions, and go, okay, does that fit the target people that we want to use this? And if so, let's put it into the program. So,
yeah, I like Gator says maybe an advanced interviewing skills, and that sounds intriguing to me. I do a lot of interviews, and I've learned to do them just by doing them. But that may be an interesting course if there's structures to it, or if there's, for people who've really thought about the art of the interview. I came at it from a job perspective. I interviewed hundreds of people for jobs, right? And so I kind of honed those skills that way. And of course, doing it here on a podcast as well. But that would be, maybe that fits in line with my communications theme of the art of the interview, in the way to get that done. There are certainly individuals that do it well. And maybe there's something to learn there.
I've been on Hulu. They now have the Hot Wings show, which is a YouTube show, but it's cool because I can now go back and watch all the seasons, and it's just amazing to watch the question come out that shows the mammoth amount of research that guy did. And every time the guest would be like, holy cow, wow, okay, that's where you went, okay, and then they'll answer the question. So John Jamingo says, I would love to take a course actually on Isotope RX. Yeah, that is one of those things. I know Steve Stewart's Podcast Editors Academy has a bunch, like I know there's a guy in there that did an overview of Reaper. And Reaper is one of those programs that I've installed and uninstalled and installed and uninstalled multiple times that I go, I don't really have time for a learning curve right now. And RX is another one. I kind of go through, click with the buttons, usually use the built-in whatever settings they have, listen to it. Is it better? Good. Yay, go. So, speaking of Ross Brand, I'd like to take a deep dive into audio editing in Chris Kern's podcast engineering school. He gets into a lot of, not so much the nuts and bolts of software, but I remember him explaining how your ears get tired and you need to give your ears a break every now and then because they start to kind of fizzle out a bit. But you're right. When it comes to interviewing, who was it that said that? Just Up the Trail said that. It would be interesting to have a Saturday or Sunday or some evening or whatever, set up a thing where, let's say you get 10 people to show up. Yeah. And then, so you have 5 groups and you have 10 minutes to just interview each other. Just ask questions and blah, blah, blah. Because the only way you get better at that is to do it. I will say this, I'm kicking myself. I had Vincent on, he has a book out called The Wealth of Connection, I think it is. And I had him on because he does a daily show. And he basically, it was kind of interesting. He did it, what some people would say wrong. Like, Jim, are you ready for this? He has no intro. Like, there's no music. You hit play, and Vincent starts telling you a story. There's a lot of things that he just didn't do. And I interviewed him because he had kind of a because of my podcast story. Well, that's where I learned he had a book. And so I went out and said, hey, to say thanks for coming on the show, I bought your book. And then I started listening to it. I'm like halfway through it now. And I was like, oh, man, I almost want to re-interview him because it kind of fits in. He did, because I told him, I said, I definitely want to have, a shot here for you to talk about your book. But I hadn't read it yet. And it was just one of those where I was like, I'm not following my own advice. Know who you're bringing on the show. And I've known him. I've met him at multiple events and things like that. But that would be my advice for if you're interviewing somebody who has a book, read the book. And I kind of didn't. I kind of knew he had a book. But I know. It's scary.
Actually read the book?
Yeah.
Why would we do things like that's like, tech reviewers who, the product comes out on a Thursday and they've got a review posted on Friday, and you're like, yeah, no, I know. I know. Sometimes you get the product early and I know there's always release dates and NDA and blah, 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 blah. But it does drive me nuts when you can tell like they haven't really, they have not really spent time in it. However, okay, I say that, Dave, but on the flip side of it, I think there is something about doing an interview where you don't know all the answers and you're genuinely curious. Like you want to figure it out for yourself and you're discovering it along the way. There's something weird about an interview where they know the answers and they're just asking the questions to get the answers. And for the listener, they don't know the answer. And so the conversation gets a little unnatural because it feels very forced. And so I think there's something good about the interviewer having some natural curiosity about it and learning along with the listeners, right? The key is to listen and be curious, right? In that. And don't be afraid to go outside of where you'd plan to go, but also come back. You put a plan together for a reason. So if you need to waver, go off for a little bit, but come back to it because you built that plan because you want to take the guest. So I think there's some things there, but you have to, this is the hard part. You have to listen and be thinking about the next question. It's not either or. You got to be able to do both, and you got to be able to do both fast. And so it's a practice. I mean, it's a skill you can learn and get better at with practice. And so if you want to be a good interviewer, just do tons of interviews.
Yeah.
You'll get better.
The master of that strategy was Larry King. Larry King, the reason he got into it was, I know, Poughkeepsie, you're on with Jim Collison. All right.
He was great on Craig Ferguson. When he'd come on Craig Ferguson's show, he was fantastic. I love that guy.
Didn't he get married like 7 times?
Maybe. Yeah.
I can't imagine. I mean, look, I got 2 under my belt. I'm like thinking real long and hard before I do number 3.
I'm still working on my first one. Let's just be really clear about that.
What I do is like in this case, I had an envelope in front of me and you can see where I wrote down brandable chunks and 8 weeks of coach, which I don't know what that means, but it was something, a lot of times I will write down one word so I can go back to listening. So if somebody says, I knew I had to do something different to stand out, I would just write down stand out and then go back to listening. Because the problem is you have that, okay, I got to ask them about standing out. And then they something else. You're like, ooh, I got to ask them about, Poughkeepsie. And then like all of a sudden you're trying to remember so much that you're not listening anymore. So the way I do it is I have something in front of me that I can write on, a pen that doesn't click, and then I just start listening. So yeah,
I have a whole book of notes, that I keep on here that to your point, I write them down. I'll go, ooh, and you can see it in my eyes. It gives it away. when I've got a good question, I brighten up even while they're talking, so I got to be careful of that one, but write that down and then come back to it or think it through. Sometimes I'll get a question, like they'll be talking about something and I get a question, then they answer it. So you got to be ready. Like, you got to be ready to have another question that doesn't ask them the same,
Well,
I think, yeah.
When I was interviewing Vincent, the book is called The Wealth of Connection. His one answer was so good that I got like engulfed in the answer to where when he got done, I laughed and I said, I'm glad this isn't live. And he goes, why? I said, because I have no idea what I'm going to ask you next. I said, that was a really good answer. And he just thought that was great. Randy has a suggestion. 100 Years in Journalism class. He says, we were assigned a book, How to Talk with Practically Anybody About Practically Anything by is she still alive, Barbara Walters?
I think so.
I think she's just old.
So, yeah.
So,
we're old.
Yeah, well, I mean, and she's older than we are, so that means she's
just a little bit.
Yeah, but I might have to check that out because she had. I don't know. That sounds like a book about. That's not an autobiography, but I know she was on Howard Stern of all people, and she was very open about the fact that she was not a great parent, like when her kid was growing up. And she's, since then kind of rectified that, but it's the whole work-life balance, and she had a whole lot of work and apparently not a lot of balance going on.
She worked a lot. Hey, can you help me with a coffee real quick?
I can do that.
I'm running out. I think some other, Chris, thanks. You weren't here in the beginning, but Chris, thanks for the coffee, by the way. I think some interviewers forget that they have a guest. And they start asking questions that have the answer. And then they also think the question itself has to be brilliant. Right. If we look at the history of World War II from 1945 to, 1947, although the war was over by then, but, and we consider all the ramifications of the Truman era. And they pontificate, and by the time that the guest gets the chance to answer, I've heard the guest go, well, yeah, you kind of answered it, in the question.
Yeah.
So I think when we try to get, as interviewers, if we try to get too smart about it, I think it kind of ruins just let them answer the question.
Yeah, Baba Wawa is
92, still
alive in 92. Randy says, and by the way, it was 100 years ago. I don't know what I said, but apparently I left out the word ago. He says, my pet peeve are folks who ask a question and the answer is, wait a minute, what? Yeah, here's the thing. What I hear a lot, and I'm guilty of this, is I will say, Jim, how many kids do you have? Because I know the one time you mentioned the blah, 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 and I get done and Jim's like, what was the question again? You asked me about 20 minutes ago. Make sure at the end of your thing, you ask so it should be, hey, I know we mentioned this a year ago. Is this saying that, yada, 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 yada. Jim, how many kids do you have? And then what's great about it, I go in and cut out my, because really all I'm giving that background for is so that the guest knows why I'm asking the question. And so I would just cut that out because usually the question is fairly obvious, but the audience doesn't need to hear the background. But
that's a good trick. That's actually a good trick. I hadn't thought of doing it that way, where you then go edit your part of the question out and just leave the guest answer. You have to ask enough so that they at least know what the question is. The other weird thing about that, Dave, is they may say some things about the way you ask the question, then it's not there. So you have to. Yeah, you have to. Careful.
Yeah, I remember once, and I always wonder if anybody caught it, but somebody in an answer said, well, like we said earlier, and then whatever they said in their answer.
Yeah, right.
And what we had said earlier, I cut out. And I was like, you know what? I bet nobody notices that.
Continuity, my friend. Continuity.
I always love those in movies when they're like, notice here in scene 3 of Star Wars where there's a Starbucks cup in the background. You're like, wait, what? So Yeah, the Jim Collison, this is from Chris Stone. He says, that's my number one problem as a host. Don't answer the question in the question.
Yeah.
I have a clip of this, and I'm going to play it somewhere in the future of the School of Podcasting, because I did my own pet peeve. And that is, if I ask something like, Jim, what did it feel like when you did such and such? And then Jim's thinking about the answer, and I go, oh my God, dead air, there's dead air. And I'll be like, was it scary? Did you da-da-da? And all of a sudden I take this, what could be a great question, and I make it multiple choice. And they go, yeah, I guess I was a little scared. And you're like, whereas if I just shut up, they would have said, well, and then it's like, I hate that. And because almost anytime somebody doesn't do multiple choice, there's an awkward pause. And at the end of that, because the person had to think about it, it's this great, answer. And so it's just hard to have that kind of awkward pause there.
Right. Well, most guests will give away in their face when they're ready to answer the question. So you'll ask a question, and if they're not sure of the answer, they'll go like this. Now, audio only, folks. Sorry, you can't.
He just tilted his head like the RCA dog.
Right. Yeah.
Nobody knows what the RCA dog is, by the way.
Just you and me, because we're old. And then, and that was actually old for me. You watch the guest, and as you're explaining the question, you'll see them lock in. Like listen, I've interviewed hundreds, maybe thousands of people. Everybody does this, and you see them lock in, and you see them like, okay, I'm ready to answer. That's the time to stop talking. But if you do ask a question and they got kind of a screwy look on their face, that's in my book, that's time to rephrase the question, and you could say, well, let me, in other words, and then rephrase that question. You'll see them get it in their face, and then turn it over to them. So there are moments where, you don't want to just throw the question out. I mean, Randy's talking about, interrogation style, where it's short. But make sure when you're asking the question, you're looking at the guest, if you can. I mean, if it's audio only, that's hard. But in this world of video, why would you do an audio only interview? I can't do them without seeing the guest. I want to see, Dave, even on this show, I'm looking for your reaction. Like, I want to know, okay, how's this landing with Dave? How are we? Is he ready to talk again? Are we ready to pull this back together? Do we need to transition? I can see all of that in you while we're doing this. So make sure you're not just listening, but that if you can, you're watching, because it gives a lot of clues of when to go and when to stay.
And Ross has a point. I just had it. One thing you see people do is rely on their list. So they've got their 5 questions. They'll ask the guest to answer a question that they've already answered.
They weren't listening. Yeah, they weren't listening. I've been guilty of this. I've done this for sure. So
Kim had asked, how do you come in to talk? AskThePodcastCoach.com/join is how you do that. The other one I love is the answer is like, well, and that's when I was walking down the street and some guy came up, they mugged my father and killed both of my parents in front of me. And they go, great. What was your aha moment? And like, they totally, again, going back to not listening, it's like, oh, holy cow. So that's, I always want to, if I ever see somebody doing it, and I've been in that interview where the person's just going down the list, especially if they go, okay, great, next question. I'm like, you don't talk like that in real life.
Yeah. Well, but yeah, they're just working through. I mean, you don't want to be hard. I mean, you're hard on them. Interviewing is a hard thing to do. It's a skill that takes practice and time. Again, if you're doing an interview show and you're not practicing your interviews in some form or fashion. The other thing, Dave, and Kim, are you going to turn your video on? So
I'm just asking her.
Yeah, ask her if she is. Let me say one more thing, and then we'll switch over to Kim. That just escaped me. Don't you hate that one? Yeah, let's bring Kim in. It just it just went away.
It'll come back.
Hey, Kim. Yeah.
How are you?
Good morning, Jim. You're getting my disease.
Which is hopefully it's okay. Yes. Yeah. Well, yeah, it happens. Yes. Maybe not enough coffee.
Maybe. I am starting a new podcast, and my goal is to get my first trailer up within the week.
Okay.
However, one of the things that I've never done is worked with somebody to create a sound that indicates my podcast, like an audio logo.
Mm.
Is that valuable? Does it have some import when you get started, or is that something you should maybe bring in later? I've got the money set aside to do it.
I've got the answer for you.
Yes. Tell me the answer.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba is
McDonald's.
McDonald's.
McDonald's. It's their brand. So Kim,
Yes.
you're talking about creating a.
Anybody? That's a hard one to do because it's like a choir. HBO.
Yeah.
Schwung is Netflix, right? Kind of. Or the stupid Law, right? What's the Law and Order? They have that.
Dun, dun.
Yeah, dun dun.
That.
Yeah. So
Kim, what are you talking about a intro, like an audio? I mean, give me some more details. How do you want to use this thing?
I don't know.
Oh,
I want to start a podcast that is about inspiring people to go back to creative endeavors that they put down, whatever that creative endeavor was. In particular, I'm going to talk about writing because that's my experience. However, I have set aside money to do this for 2 years. And this is one of the things that I thought might be worth doing because I've never done it before. Also, voiceovers. Are those really worth the investment? We are not doing video.
Here's
audio only. Okay.
Here's a question, because I get this a lot. Which is better, me saying, hey, it's Saturday morning, ask the podcast coach, or what if I had some pre-made thing that said, hey, it's Saturday, it's time for Ask the Podcast Coach. And my answer is do both and pick one. I honestly don't know. I know some people say, oh, it sounds more professional because Jimmy Fallon doesn't introduce himself. The other guy does. And I'm like, okay, I get that. I don't know that, like, if you introduce yourself, it's like, oh, I'm not listening to that. Why? Well, they introduced themselves. I don't think it's that big a deal. I think it does sound maybe a little more professional. And that way, when they say, here's Dave Jackson, I don't have to go, hey, I'm Dave Jackson. I can just click in because that guy just said, here's Dave Jackson.
Right.
So, Jim, what do you think?
So if it's a jingle, like, I think there's kind of different categories of this, right? So if it's a jingle, that's maybe what you're going to play when you open it. I think there's a lot of psychological value in that being repeated every single time in the exact same spot. It alerts people they're in the right place, right? Oh, I found the right place. Okay, I need to get mentally ready for this that I'm listening to. But there are also elements like Dave talked about in the crime one, that dun dun, that sound that became, so you hear it now and you're like, oh yeah, that's Law and Order, right? There could be some elements like that in the podcast that if you use them correctly, they could be very, very powerful. The hard part is, did they know in Law and Order that thing was going to be right? Did they know that before? I don't know if they did or not, right? I mean, I think
they wanted
try
it to.
Well, they did, and it worked. Whatever they did, it worked, right?
I will
but if every show did that,
I know.
Go ahead, Dave.
I've had people come up to me at events, and they just walk up to me and go,
"The School of Podcasting with Dave Jackson." Yeah.
So,
well, that's the jingle, right? That's the power of the jingle.
Yes.
Yeah, the power of the jingle.
So, I guess the question, do I need that when I start? I didn't have it when I started. I used to have a guy that sounded like he drank glass start the show. If you listen to early versions, it was the same music, but this guy came on and he said, "It's the School of Podcasting's morning announcements." And I thought that guy sounded good with Dave Jackson. It was bad.
What are you thinking?
I know why you picked that. That's a Northeast Ohio icon voice.
I guess. Yeah, probably. Yeah, that's true. But I actually, at one point, I'd figured out that this
School of Podcasting Podcasting.
I was going to take those notes. No, 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 no. I was going to map that out and play them on the guitar and use them as transition music and make that my audio, whatever Kyle called it, my audio brand or something like that.
Yeah.
So,
what are you thinking, Kim?
I don't know.
Like, yeah,
I am really at the beginning. I have pod faded from my old podcast. Toastmasters 101 is still up, but it's no longer in production by me. We're trying to find a new host to take it over. And that would be wonderful to see that continue in that way. That most of the content is evergreen, so I don't have to worry about it. Most of it is not going to get dated very quickly. And I don't care what my sponsor does with it, quite honestly. If they decide they don't want to pay for it anymore, okay. I want to move on to this new thing. I'm excited about this new thing, which it's fun to be excited about projects and podcasting again. So I'd like to expand my borders and expand my experience. And this is one of the things that was on my checklist to think maybe I should invest in this, even if it's $50 on Fiverr.
Yeah. If you just need a voiceover, mediavoiceovers.com is Wayne Henderson, who is the guy that I use a lot. Music Radio Creative does really good work. They're a little more expensive. That's Mike Russell in the crew. That's an interesting site because you go over and they just have this wall of voices to pick from. And then you basically say, okay, I'll take Bruce and I need it upbeat, professional, blah, blah. And then if you want, they can actually write the intro for you. Now, in your case, I don't think you need that service, but
no, not particularly.
Yeah.
Kim, is this podcast going to be community? Is it going to be information? Is it going to be, I mean, what's kind of the style? What are you hoping to get out of it?
Inspiration and accountability.
Okay.
So this is going to be my journey to being published this year.
Okay.
So I want to invite people to come along with me. I want to document this. And I need somebody to be behind me saying, you promised you were going to do this.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I think in podcasting, that is there's somebody out there who can help me do that. And I don't think I'm alone in being one of those people, particularly at my age I've started a lot of things and now I have more time that I could finish these things. I just need to think about that instead of wasting my time in front of Netflix watching whatever those shows were that you were just talking about that I've never seen.
Right. My sinkhole is YouTube. I just go and watch, lawn mowing videos, those kinds of things. And you're like,
yes.
Why do I need to watch somebody mow somebody else's yard? Like I need to mow mine.
Right. Yes.
So it's a journey podcast. I think you've got some time. Like there's some great, as you're going along this journey with your listeners, right? You want to bring them along with you.
Yes.
And I think this is one of those opportunities to allow them to influence some of those audio brand. You'll have listeners who will make things for you. And I think in this style of podcasting where it's a journey, it's really, really important to include them in with what you're doing. So you may come up with your own jingle or your own audio bits, whatever you're doing. But I think you also have a great opportunity to get input from them and play those things into this. So, that may, I think sometimes we miss on that opportunity to get the audience more involved. And this may be one of those areas.
I don't have an audience.
Well, you don't yet. But you will as you start on this journey.
That's where you might want to ask your sponsor if you can do one more episode of Toastmasters101.net that says, hey, if you enjoyed this podcast, we're looking for a new host. It will, blah, 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 blah. I'm going to be going, and this is where you need not so much a website, but you definitely need a URL to send people to. So if nothing else, you can collect their email to let them know when it's ready and things like that. Because you've got an audience that they came for Toastmasters101.net. But they will definitely follow you where you go. Not everybody.
No.
But I was always amazed at the number of people that followed me to my show for musicians that weren't musicians.
Okay.
And I'm like, why are you listening? Like, I just think you're funny. And I was like, okay. Looks aren't everything.
Relationships. Yeah, they came for the relationships.
Yeah.
Well, like Jim said, we watch lawnmowers. We watch people
Yeah,
rescue
right.
seals. I watch a lady help sheep give birth. I'm never going to do these things, but I watch them endlessly.
Yeah, it's pretty great. Well, I think you got a great opportunity. I think in this you've answered some of the question. I would wait. I would get into this because you're not going to have a lot of listeners out the gate, right?
Right.
So get out the gate, get some things going, and then like we talked about at the beginning of the show, maybe at episode 10 you start thinking about, okay, what elements, now that I know who's listening and what I want to do,
Right.
now spend some money on some things that, because it's journey, so it'll be fine. The back episodes will, if the back episodes are different than what you're currently doing now, people understand that you're on this journey, right? So
Yes.
I'd go, go ahead, Dave.
Do you have a name yet?
Writing again.
Okay. So I would then say, is it, if you kind of think of like what I talk about with Mark, which is, what kind of brand do you want? Is it fun and bubbly? Is it super serious? Is it, whatever kind of thing? And then try to find music that kind of fits that kind of brand. And then it's a matter of, okay, am I looking for music to be a jingle, or am I just looking for background music because I need somebody to say, welcome to Writing Again, where we blah, 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 so you can blah, blah, blah. Here's your host, Kim Krajci. Because that's the easy way to make an intro is you find some music, you hire a Fiverr dude, you put the two together because you know how to mix music and audio, and intro done. So, but I have seen people stall on getting the music. Like they're super passionate and they just can't find the right thing. And I was like, Mark Maron started off with AC/DC. So he changed it later because, well, that's illegal. Yeah. But you can't always change the music. So
I did find music already.
Well, there you go. So
but to have something that implied or some kind of soundscape that I could use, audio branding, like Kyle said, I'm just exploring options.
Yeah.
So
I
I'm
think
also,
it's a great question. It's a great question. Go ahead, Kim.
I'm also watching a how-to series on how to do Podpage. And there's a whole bunch of little videos that this guy did that are about 15, 20 seconds long, maybe. And him. And I keep stopping and starting, and I'm really stuck at this point, but they said, this is really hard to do. You may have to call your URL people, GoDaddy, and tell them to do it for you because I can't get the redirect to work.
It's not a redirect though. It's a
whatever it is.
Yeah,
you got to change the CNAME and then
email or go over to Podpage and hit the chat button. Because Brendan has a team of people over there, and what they there's a thing, if you go into Podpage, and just to show you where it is, it will show you. Can Kim share her screen?
Yeah.
On StreamYard,
she can. Sure.
If you want to log into your Podpage thing, there is a way you can do this.
If it's a CNAME though, that's going to be over at the host provider.
Yeah.
Is that at GoDaddy?
All of it, but that's the problem. GoDaddy, I'm a GoDaddy reseller, and I will one day go into a domain. I'll say, show me all my domains. I'll click on one and go edit, and whatever I need to change is right there. I can go in the next day, do the exact same steps, and it's nothing that I want it to do. So it's that's where I'm like, and sometimes you have to call, C names and A names. But what I was going to say is inside of Podpage, you can go in and see where it says edit. If you go to website and domain names. So here, let me share my screen. And for anyone listening, this is a tool that makes it super easy to make a website. So if you go to website and edit domain name, so in this case, here's Podcast Trailer Show, and it's just saying me, hey, everything is set up. So I have a bunch of green check marks. In yours, it will say you need to remove this and add this.
And I did those steps. They had a whole page of what to do on GoDaddy. da 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 da. And
Yeah.
so
What's your website address again?
writing again .life.
Again,
Oh, that's
because
cool.
in some
I like
cases
that.
what happens is this. Yeah, welcome to your new website. You're up.
I'm
What that
up. Why am
you're
I
up.
not seeing me up?
Go to if this is your website, Kim Krajci. Is that what you're
That's
looking
me.
for?
Okay.
Yeah. So what it is,
I had a
probably
typo.
you probably had well, that's it. The other thing is, and this
It's
this
two
isn't so
Ts.
much this isn't so much a is there two T's? Yeah. No. Anyway, but doesn't matter if this is Podpage, WordPress, whatever. When you update your domain name,
Yeah.
there's probably going to be anywhere from 20 minutes to 48 hours that your website will not show up. And it's
Right.
because I think the fun word is propagation.
Mhm.
As your address updates across the internet and everybody updates their Rolodex of the internet. So
Kim, you may not be seeing it because it's an unsecure page, and your browser may be blocking it.
Now I need to be able to type right.
Oh, okay.
oh
Yeah.
awesome.
It is. You'll want to spend a little bit to get the site. Well, I guess when it's on Podpage.
Well,
it'll
Podpage
be
has
really
built-in security, and that's
Okay.
another one where it might show up for the first day, but say your site is insecure because the
Yeah.
certificate hasn't
Yeah, the
done the hokey
SSL
pokey. Yeah,
says it'll
good.
resolve itself
Good. Okay.
eventually. And that's why I went with Podpage, because now I don't have to think about that.
Yeah,
Instead of
that's a good
doing
call.
my own website again, I just
Yeah.
thought Dave talks about Podpage all the time. I'm gonna put the money into this in new ways instead
good
of
call.
doing the same
Yeah.
old. Because one of the problems with Toastmasters 101 is I was really bored doing it. So
Mm.
I need some new challenges, and this
There we
is
go.
what I thought it could be.
learning
So
new stuff
I
again.
will wait until episode 10 before I do a media blast and just start working out my kinks now.
Yeah.
Wait a minute,
Yeah,
that
there
was
you
a bad way to say that. Cauldron's in here, isn't he?
Awesome.
Kim, thanks for jumping in.
Thanks a
All
lot,
right.
guys.
Always
Yep,
good to see
we'll
you.
see you. And of course, that means that Dave forgot to upload the slides. Great. I want to thank our awesome supporters. You can find them at askthepodcastcoach.com/support. And I'll be adding Ross. Oh, Ross is already on that list again from livestreamuniverse.com. But we want to thank James over at the Dog Podcast Network. If you have a little pooch or a hound or a mutt, go over to dogpodcastnetwork.com. They've got long, short shows, and all shows in between, and you're going to love it. Dog Podcast Network. It's great to listen to while you're walking the pooch around the block, and now that the weather's getting nice here in the U.S., you should be doing that. Speaking of Podpage, you should try Podpage at trypodpage.com, or you can do what Kim did and go to learnpodpage.com, which is a free course I have. And if you just can't get enough of Jim Cullison, then who can, right? Go to theaverageguy.tv. And if you're looking to start a podcast, well, when you think podcasting, think School of Podcasting, and I'll be more than happy to help you now with unlimited time-shifted one-on-one consulting. And of course, if you'd like to be an awesome supporter, just like Ross did, so we can play the magic supporter music, go over to askthepodcastcoach.com/support. And thanks to everyone for supporting me over there at askthepodcastcoach.com. So yes, and Cauldron is in the house. So, see, now that's what's funny about that is because when she said kinks, I was like, you really got me, or something like that.
That's
So,
exactly where I went to.
yeah.
Well, we know advertising doesn't work because you just said my site name, theaverageguy.tv, and I have my Google Analytics up in, watching the real-time overview.
Oh.
Not one single person went to my site, Dave. So this whole podcast
Hold on.
advertising thing,
It doesn't
You
work.
know?
4 billion. The average guy. Maybe we need to make the .tv a little bigger. The
I mean,
average
I'm-
guy.
the average guy.
.tv.
.tv. Nobody,
Yeah.
I haven't seen one person go to my site. So
Maybe
this doesn't
maybe-
work. This advertising stuff just doesn't work.
Average guy dot. I'll put it in the chat room.
Just doesn't work.
Somebody,
Dave.
yeah.
I'm
Well,
still
here,
still
I didn't
watching.
even realize it. What did we just do?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's his
Yeah, that's
audio
a
jingle.
It's a jingle. Yeah.
I guess in a way, but it's the same.
Well, you've done it enough though, right? You've done it
Yeah.
enough that people, it's recognizable. That's one of those things. That's where repetition kicks in. You know,
Right.
you got to do it and do it consistently, so people recognize it.
Yeah.
Oh, finally, somebody came to my site. Geez.
Yay! Thank you so much.
What do I got to do to get a like? Like down
That's-
here. What do we got to do? Click the like button. Jeez, you've just been sitting there getting good information all morning or afternoon or whatever it is for you. Click that like button.
That is me. Uncle Marv wants to know who has the lawnmower in the background. That is Mr. Bondurant making his appearance as he does every Saturday.
I didn't hear that. Uncle Marv, good ears.
Yeah, I've got a noise gate on, but that's here's a question. Oh, I hit the wrong thing. An interesting topic, kinda. Written articles repurposed as a podcast. Any thoughts on that? Hey, I do it every week. Using them one-on-one or modifying the match speech. Yeah, that's what I do. I write when here's my process for the School of Podcasting when it's not an interview is number one, what am I trying to say? I have some sort of, at the end, this is my main focus. This is the main takeaway that I want people to get. So my last one was, here are 9 things that you can learn from Netflix. So then I write out a blog post because I want to figure out what is it I'm trying to say. And then from there, I boil it down to bullet points because I don't want to read my podcast to you because that would sound boring if I had to read it. But when I write my blog post, I still write it like I talk. I kind of throw not so much grammar out the window, but I do write in a very conversational style. And then I look at, which helps me again, figure out what I'm going to say. I boil it down to bullet points. I look at my invisible listener across the table from me who I'm really excited to talk about. And then I hit record. And then by doing that, there's people like, I don't have time to write a blog post. The time I spend on writing a blog post is the time I used to spend on editing that I don't spend on editing anymore. So I always say it's a seesaw. More prep means less editing. Less prep means more editing. But I know there are people that script out their whole show. It's again, do both. Which one do you like better? Do that one. It's, so Jim, what do? You do interviews mostly.
It's all
so-
conversational. Yeah, but we still put a big, large amount of effort into having a good solid outline before we get going. I mean, rarely do I go into an interview cold, like with nothing.
Yeah.
I usually work with the guest before they come on to get 4 or 5 points that we're going to cover. That makes the guest feel good about like, okay, we know we're kind of going this direction. And then I do my best to actually follow. And once we get the outline, I try to, like, we'll dance around it. We never follow it exactly the way it is, but we'll hit most or all of the points that are in there. I'm always listening for other interesting things for them to talk about, but generally I'm an outline guy. So I like, and some guests will give me a gigantic outline, and that's okay. Some guests will give me 3 bullets. That's okay. I can do with just about anything. But yeah, on the interview side, it's not, we're just not gunslinging. There's some thought and some prep that goes into it to make sure we've got some kind of order.
Yeah. Gary says he likes my workflow. I didn't used to do it that way. I used to start with my 4 bullet points, record the episode, and then expand the bullet points into a blog. And inevitably, as I was listening back to my show, something would come in my head and I go, ooh, I should have said that. And then it was a matter of, it's 20 till midnight. Do I want to go back and shove in a sentence and a half? And 99% of the time I said no. Yeah. So I was like, And so after about the 3rd time of doing that, I was like, I need to flesh out what I want to say first, because I keep doing this. I keep thinking of things because I've gone through the process of flushing out what I want to say. And so I just flopped it. I was like, let's write out the blog post first. then go to bullet points, and then record. And I don't have that problem anymore. So I think we're all different. I don't know that there's a one size fits all. I know Mike Wilkerson over at Two Guys Talking Podcast Network says he requires a skeleton for all podcast efforts he has. It's not a script, but it's a map. Yeah. Because if I don't have anything, it's chaos. It's dogs and cats living together. It's just no. So.
Total chaos.
I can't do it.
That's the greatest. That's the greatest part of that movie, by the way. Ghostbusters is what we're talking about. But
yes.
If you haven't watched that part, The Office, that is just the where they're in the office and they're all around. There's just so many good jokes in that 3-minute span. Yeah, it's classic.
There are things I want to quote. It is true.
No, you should. Yes,
yeah, I'm not going to do that live, but Bill Murray is amazing in that.
Keep it friendly. So, yes. Yeah. No, it's good.
Exactly.
It's good. It makes me smile every time.
Yeah. Gary says, I'm working on an episode with 3 different experts on one topic. Listening and picking the best bits quite challenging. Here's one thing. Here's the strategy, man. I swear to God, Mr. Bondurant is almost in my room at this point.
Is he mowing your living room, Carl?
He's mowing my living room. And the guy is 80 plus years old, and he I think measures his grass by like the millimeter. He's like, we're up to 11 minutes. Time to mow the grass again. I'm like, oh, good.
It's that time of year here where you got to mow it every other day. Otherwise, it's 10 feet tall.
A strategy I've done here is if I have one topic, and granted, if we go back to listening, there's always going to be some great follow-up stuff. But if you can have a list of questions that you ask everybody, it's kind of cool to then say, well, we asked, whatever, such and such. And then you get to do the cool, and I think, if I remember right, I think Gary has an English accent, right? If I remember right. Is Gary English? British?
I can't remember.
I can't, but anyway, if it was, I could say something like Jim Cullison, and then here's Jim's answer, and then it's like, Kim Krajci, and then here's her answer, and it's like, it's just a cool way to have, I don't know, for me, that was one that I thought it was fun.
Yeah, no, it's a trick you can do to get the same information from a bunch of people and then stitch that together.
Yes,
he is British.
He's British. Which just makes it and you have the even better thing. Your show's going to sound great, just like you could read the phone book.
Well, at least to Americans,
right?
Like, because we think the British accent sounds smart. I think. Why
is that?
I wonder. History, I
guess.
History.
Let's see. What are we doing? We got 15 minutes left. If you want to, of course, as always, if you want to jump in like Kim did. It's askthepodcastcoach.com/join. We are at askthepodcastcoach.com/live. And look at that. Ladies and gentlemen, wait a minute. I've got to get his music before I bring him in.
I feel like royalty is joining us here.
It is royalty. Ladies and gentlemen, Livestream Universe's Ross Brand. Hey, buddy. How are you?
Hey, guys. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Had a question that I thought would be easier to ask on voice rather than the chat, so I rolled out of bed, threw on a T-shirt, and here I am.
We appreciate
the shirt. Thank you.
So this is actually a question I asked Jim in a private, one-on-one conversation probably about 3 or 4 years ago and didn't do anything on it. And I doubt Jim even remembers, but I'd like to get both of your thoughts.
Apparently,
on
I wasn't
this.
inspiring to you, Ross, at that point. So let's try again.
I didn't know what I wanted to do at the time. I still don't know what I want to do. So, but I'm curious what you both think to this. Most of my podcasts are live streams that I go, that would make a good podcast too, and I rip the audio from. They're not specifically recorded as audio podcasts. They're live streams, and then I rip the audio. I have about 5 different podcast shows under different names. I don't know if one person, if I were to go name 2 of my podcasts, could actually name other than Ross Brand or Livestream Universe. And so I'm starting to do some things again that are not on a regular timeline where, okay, this show goes once a month or this show goes every week. Would it make sense to just take all of my podcast stuff and put it into one feed and make it like, Livestream Universe Audio or, Ross Brand Livestream Universe or something. I don't know. Rather than have like, okay, this one's got its own artwork and this one's got its own dated artwork and this one's got its own dated logo. And
are they all talking about the same thing?
Well, I have live stream deals, which focuses on products and services for live streamers, which used to be like interviewing 3 or 4 people in one show, and then I'd make, some of them into podcasts as I had the time. Now it's like maybe I go live on Amazon Live and I talk about something that I go, that would make an interesting podcast. So I don't know what it's going to become. I don't have a schedule for any of these things in terms of when I release. It's like there's a good idea for something, right? And I'll do an episode, but then I might not do one for a while. I've got brand on broadcasting, which is almost anything that doesn't fall into live stream deals that I want to talk about related to live streaming, podcasting, gear, whatever. But again, not something that I release regularly. And now I've started doing like a panel discussion thing. Again, it kind of follows the same line as the other stuff. It's about what's going on in the industry and creators. I'm not sure how often I'm going to do it, but it converts well to a podcast. I've actually put it on Spotify as a video podcast, but haven't thought about distributing it. But I'm just wondering if my life wouldn't be easier, and that of anybody who wanted to subscribe to anything that I'm doing would be easier if I just had one feed and you could go back but it would be a jumble of like,
Right.
you're in the feed, you're like, now I'm on episode 39 of live stream deals. Now I'm on episode 10 of this, or, here's a 2-minute update. Like if I really were to pour everything into one feed, it would be like, taking a deck of cards and shuffling it up.
Right. I think my take is the same as Mike's. I wouldn't put them all in one feed only. Like the only way you can get this, and the reason I say that is because of the blues. I could say, hey, in all of my podcasts, I talk about the blues. My one podcast is about Texas Electric Blues. My other podcast is about Delta Blues. And my third one is about Zydeco Blues or whatever inside. But it's all the blues, right? It's all the same stuff. I hate Delta Blues. I hate it. It's guys from the 20s with static and out-of-tune guitars. But I love the blues. But I hate
blues
that
is
stuff.
the best. It's where everything came from.
I know. I get that. But it's out of... But, so... And also I would ask, have you watched everything on Netflix?
No.
Okay, why not? Because obviously you
I don't have a subscription.
Okay, but like...
But when I did, I had a subscription to watch one thing, and then I...
Right. So I don't think it's a bad idea. I'm with Mike. When the only way you can get this is to take everything. Because of Netflix, we're used to taking what we want, when we want, where we want it. And now you're saying, oh, yeah, I'd love to give you that choice, but here's your choice. It's one. Take it or leave it. I get your point because it is more work. But Jim, you are deep in thought right now.
Well, I'm just wondering, what's the audience think? Like, do you get enough feedback from your audience to know how they're listening or why they're listening, or does it make sense?
I'm too inconsistent to get any sort of pattern. And like I say, if you had let's say Dave's book had just come out and I could invite Dave to be on any one of my shows, and that topic, profit from your podcast, would fall in line with the show. He could be on a panel to talk about how creators can monetize. He could be on brand and broadcasting, and talk about that. He could be on live stream deals. It's a product. I mean, like, he could be on any of my, like, and I think that probably goes the same for almost any topic I talk about, right? We could make it work for almost any show. Now, some people don't have a product, and it's really just talking about issues and things, but for the most part, I'm not sure that, like, most of my guests know which show they were on if I were to say, what show were you on, right?
Right.
I mean, even like I just switched my YouTube channel used to always be called Livestream Universe until I scheduled a live and couldn't find it real quick, and I put into the search bar my first and last name, and I realized that's probably how everybody else is searching for me too. And of course, some channel that I started 10 years ago with like 14 subscribers came up, and not my main Livestream Universe channel. I'm like, oh, really? So if I Google my name, only my guest appearances and my crappy channel that I don't want anybody to find come up. But if I Google Livestream so maybe I need to change. Like, so I'm just trying to think, like, how does a user think? Like, do they ever looking for any of the specific shows or not? You know, and especially since I don't do them that regularly. I don't know.
Ross, you're on to it. You just said the answer. How do my listeners expect to get this content, right? And then fashion it in a way that delivers it to them the best. I'm not necessarily totally in agreement that you shouldn't just have one feed that has it all, because you might have a listener that wants everything in one place, right? And you could easily, I'm going to send Dave Jackson off the deep end on this one, but you could easily use Anchor for that and load those, just create an Anchor feed that has them all. And people say, where are they all? Point them to that RSS feed, right? It can be all channels. There's a ton of different ways to do this. So if you're using WordPress, you can have a master feed that way. I mean, there's lots of different things you can do. But the answer to your question is, when you said, what does my listener expect? I think you should do a little bit of research, both on your own and with your listener, to say, how are you listening and why are you listening? And that'll give you the answer. That'll tell you what you need to do.
Mike says he does this with his law enforcement stuff. He has a bunch of cop shows and stuff, as well as two guys. He has two guys talking, all you can eat. So if you love cop stuff, but if you just love all things two guys talking, so that's where he says maybe not be the only way you could do it.
Have a master feed, because there'll be some that we have this at Gallup. There's people who like, I want to hear everything. I don't want to subscribe to the 9 different podcasts. I want them all. Okay, great. We've got a way for you to do that. Others are like, no, all I want is Call to Coach, or all I want is Theme Thursday, or all I want is Talent Mindfulness, or all I want is right. So you do both.
Yeah, exactly. Because I never remember. I would have to ask you, like, when you were coming on as a guest, tell me again what shows I need to talk about from Gallup. Right. I just know that Jim does podcasts for Gallup every week, and it doesn't register to me that the shows have their own names at some point. It's just Jim did another show. Let me check that out. So, but on your network, it's different, because I know Home Gadget Geek specifically, because some of your other 2 shows are too technical for me.
Right. So. Yeah. Well, and some people, like, it's so funny with the brand that I have, they were like, so I mix up people with this AverageGuy.tv thing. They're like, what's that about? And is that the name of the podcast, or is Home Gadget Geeks the name? And so it's just, listen, no matter what you do, oftentimes it's difficult. Even the strongest of brands get brand confusion. So
right.
Yeah.
JD says Livestream Universe is a great brand to put it all under. Everybody in the chat room is kind of saying the same thing. They're like, maybe keep them separate and offer a all-in-one. And it kind of goes back to
easy.
Again, yeah.
Make it easy for yourself by doing what's the simplest for you too. Otherwise you'll stop doing it.
Dave, do you have an all-in-one feed?
I do not. In fact, what I do is always tell people, if you want to listen to every topic I do, listen to the School of Podcasting, because eventually it will make it there. So I have like a show called Profit from Your Podcast, and I will talk about monetization. So you might hear it there first, like a month and a half, and then I'll boil that down to whatever I said into a segment, and it'll be, so it's everything podcasting is that's why the whole Plan, Launch, Grow, I can kind of cover anything there. The only thing that it still kind of fits is I just did an interview with a guy about building your community, and that's kind of podcasting and kind of on the edge. So it's out in 2 episodes. I have one podcast strictly about community, called the Grow Your Community Show. But I also use that guy on the Profit from Your Podcast show because it's for coaches. But that will eventually make it into a School of Podcasting show. So I always say, if you want to listen to, if you want to catch everything that I eventually do, it will eventually be in the School of Podcasting. So that is my all-in-one kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. You're doing great without anything I say, so I'm just throwing out ideas here. But I'm thinking, okay, we really show up for the host, right? Like, I really show
in many
up
cases,
to listen to Dave, and like you could be reading from the phone book. I'd probably show up and enjoy that half an hour or whatever. So
funny
if
you say
you
that.
did have a master feed. It's like there are probably podcasts. You have so many podcasts that there's some I've probably never listened to. But if you had a master feed, that's one less like looking around that I have to do where I might come to somebody else's podcast. It's like I get my daily Dave Jackson and I just listen to that. And it's like maybe that weeds out some other things that I might spend time on just because I don't remember all your different podcasts. And so I listen to School of Podcasting and Ask the Podcast Coach, the other ones, not as much. And I'm just wondering if you had a feed, it's like, oh, just make time to listen to Dave Jackson today.
I could do that.
But would you be cannibalizing your numbers? Because you have really good numbers.
Because what it does, well, in terms of if it was in Apple, you're kind of cannibalizing yours because now you're competing with yourself. But in terms of downloads, it's the same media host. Doesn't matter who your media. If you're using what Mike was talking about, which is Blueberry's PowerPress, where you can make a feed, you can have, like I have davidjackson.org, I think. I could put all the episodes over there, use PowerPress, and make a feed with everything I've ever done and every episode I've ever done. It'd be kind of a hodgepodge of a website then, but you could do it.
I want you to
I'm
call
not
it
saying you need to do that. I'm just saying it's a thought that I had as I'm trying to figure this all this all out.
I want him to do it, and I want him to name it Jammin' Dave Jackson feed. That's what I want.
I have that website. Just go to jammandDave.com.
That would be the all access feed.
Access, yeah.
Jammin' Dave Jackson.
And it's funny you mentioned the phone book thing. Next week, Jim and I are going to take turns reading the phone book, but we're going to do it in an English accent. So
there you go.
First up,
that's going to be
Adams,
brutal.
James, Roy. So,
I apologize in advance.
Yeah. And then
Jammin'
the other thing
Dave
is,
Jackson.
That was me back in the day.
That's an old name for Dave Jackson.
Yeah, if you go to YouTube and type in Jammin' with no G, Jammin' Dave Jackson plays Texas Flood, it might still come up. It's from like 1989. It's a very old, very grainy video. It's awful, but you get to see me shred, and in the middle, I'm wearing a tie, and in the middle of the shred, I have to take my hand, move the tie, so I can keep on going. It's fun.
So good.
Links
Ross,
in the show
thanks for jumping in
guys.
here, Ross. Good to see you.
Great
Congratulations on this book, by the way. You've got
thank you.
You that thing is taking on a life of its own. I'm kind of regretting turning you down on it, but good work. Congratulations.
Are you gonna do this every year?
I don't know.
I'm gonna say it's a lot of work.
I'm leaning towards maybe. It is.
Okay.
It's a lot of work to do each year.
And this year it seems like it's had more of a life of its own than in years past. Like
and I'm wondering if I should just do it as a book and not as a blog post still, so that it's a little bit less work. But I don't know. It's just like, let's see what's on the horizon. But
figure it out as you go.
I've been doing the predictions for 7 years, so this is the second year that I've done it as a book.
Well, I definitely will not turn you down the next time you ask me for for a recommendation. So
you thought it wasn't going to be any good, so you're
I
like,
just didn't. I was just like, you've got to bigger fish to fry. So Ross, thanks for jumping in. Good to see you.
All right, thanks guys.
All right, take care.
See ya. Yes, I have. Can you play a YouTube video in a video?
Yeah, you can bring it.
Can I?
Are we gonna get a takedown? Like, will the copyright owner of this take us down?
Let me share my screen.
This would be a good test to see, like, because you would get the get the copyright strike, right? It would alert you that you played your own.
Yeah, you can't hear it though. That's the other thing when I was thinking about this. But you'll see here where yeah. So look how grainy that is. That's ridiculous. And my hair was black. So
yeah, look at that.
Yeah. So but we used to. The fun thing of this, for anyone listening to this, it's me in a silk shirt. What does it say? 2002. Yeah, you can barely read it. It's so grainy. But the fun thing was when you play an outdoor festival on a black stage, and it's about 1 PM, your feet are on fire, which is why the whole band is back in the shade there. But yeah, so that's
it is, jamming Dave Jackson.
Dave Jackson, yeah. So that was me back in the day.
Love
so
it.
I'll put a link to this out in if you want to watch it. It's back when I played in a band called the Sugar Daddies. I do still own that Strat. That's I play that Strat now in church, a little different audience. But
love it.
The fun thing about the Sugar Daddies was when we told people about our website, which doesn't exist anymore, we'd have to say it's the Sugar Daddies, because if you went to sugardaddies.com, well, let's just say you had to be 18 to get into that. So, but anyway, yes, here's the thing. We're talking, and I realize we're running over because Uncle Marv said, did the whole band wear a tie? Yeah, the singer used to wear a zoot suit because we started off as kind of a swing band. First we started off as blues, then we realized, again, going back to starting in one direction and ending in another, and we started off as a diehard blues band. Then we realized you can't dance to Hoochie Coochie Man, and so for our 3rd anniversary we brought in a horn section and started playing things like Soul Man and other things. But we also learned, we also could play ZZ Top and the Black Crowes. And so we could kind of play just about anything we wanted to. But it changed based on who the audience was, what the gig was. We had to learn some mellow stuff because we started playing weddings. So, again, your podcast is not a statue. It's a recipe. And if I can I'm sitting here talking to myself so I can give my time to find my music, and then I'm not finding my music. So, Jim, here we go. Finally, I think. Yes, there's the fun
smooth transition, Dave. Smooth transition.
Yes, thank you. Just explain that I'm transitioning now.
Hey, everybody, we're going to transition to the end.
Yeah. What's coming up on Home Gadget Geeks?
Yeah, so Erin Lawrence, she's a Canadian tech blogger, I think is her site. She comes on once a quarter. I should have that memorized. As often as she's on the show, I should have that memorized. We talk about robot vacuum cleaners and monitors. So she's tested out a bunch of monitors. She's doing a really great job. It'll be posted a little bit later today or maybe tomorrow, homegadgetgeeks.com.
And on the School of Podcasting, I can't decide. I've had a lot of people ask for my opinion on the Podcast Academy removing Daniel J. Lewis. Todd and Rob covered it.
They did a good job of covering it.
It's a fun subject that could get me in a lot of hot water, and it doesn't really have to do with podcasting. So I might talk about that, or you'll hear Danny Pena, because that's a really good interview. Danny had the stuff that is happening to Danny is like he had the president of a company want to meet him because of his podcast. Nice. That doesn't happen too often. No,
cool.
But enjoy your Saturday. Speaking of that, next Saturday, the 21st, I may be coming to you from a hotel room. I'll definitely not be here. I'll be in Allentown, Pennsylvania. So if you're in Allentown, Pennsylvania, let me know. But I'm going over there Friday to see a play with a friend in it. So that's what's going on. Are you teasing an episode where you do an update on all the gear and tools you use, but never actually did it? I thought I did, but I'll check. Randy, thank you for that. But we'll see you next week. Take care.